Hi everyone and welcome back to another video. In this video I'm going to go through 100 individuals who were convicted and jailed for their involvement in the riots that broke out in the UK in late July and early August of 2024. The disorder came about after Axel Rudakubana murdered 3 young girls, Bebe King, Elsie Dot Stancombe and Alice da Silva Aguiar in Southport on the 29th of July. He was subsequently jailed for life with a minimum term of 52 years, and I've done a video about his sentencing if you do want to check it out. Following the news about the murders, information appeared online which suggested that the perpetrator was an illegal immigrant who had come across the channel in a small boat. What followed was days of disorder in cities and towns around the country, which led to over 1,000 arrests, hundreds charged, and a significant number of them were handed prison sentences by the courts. Now in this video there are 100 people who were jailed for their participation in that disorder, some of it as protesters or rioters, some as counter-protestors, and others who posted content online encouraging the disorder. Now I'll go through each of them in alphabetical order to tell you what they were charged with, how long their sentences were, briefly what they did, and in which town or city they were involved in the disorder. The only exception to my list is the person at number 100, where I've included a bonus video which some of you may have seen on social media. Welcome to my channel, Andy on Crime, where I talk about high-profile criminal cases and other aspects of criminal law in England and Wales. If you would like to support my channel, then please click the link in the description below to NordVPN, where you can sign up at a discount to one of their plans, and by doing so you will be supporting my channel. And one final thing to say is that I've used a variety of sources to put together this video, and I strive to be as accurate as possible. But if I have made a mistake, then I do apologise, and I'm sure some of you will let me know in the comments down below. With all that being said, let's get into the video. First up on the list is No Man Ahmed. 24-year-old Ahmed initially joined a group of people guarding a mosque in Middlesbrough after disorder broke out. He was filmed attempting to punch 2 white men who had allegedly made racist threats towards the mosque. He handed himself into police 6 days later before pleading guilty to violent disorder, and he was sentenced to 14 months in prison. At number 2 on the list is Samir Ali. 21-year-old Ali was sentenced to 20 months in prison for the offence of a fray after participating in a violent confrontation in Leeds. Ali had been walking in a group of about 17 people following demonstrations outside of Leeds Art Gallery. As they were walking, they encountered a group of 4 men on Great George Street, 2 of whom were draped in Union Jack flags, while a third was wearing a Union Jack mask. CCTV footage played to the court showed Ali punching 2 of them before grabbing another man's flag and attacking him. He then returned to the other men and continued to attack them. Ali pleaded guilty to the charge and was sentenced to 20 months in prison. At number 3 on the list is Rory Mott. 34-year-old Aington Mott was sentenced to 3 years and 3 months in prison after pleading guilty to violent disorder during the Southport riots. Footage presented at Liverpool Crown Court showed Aington Mott, who had travelled from his home in Newport, Shropshire, to take part in the disorder in Southport, throwing bricks and a wheelie bin at police officers, contributing to the severe violence faced by law enforcement during the unrest. At number 4 on the list is James Aspin. 34-year-old Aspin was sentenced to 20 months in prison for distributing a recording intended to stir up religious hatred. Following the tragic killing of the 3 young girls in Southport, Aspin posted a nearly 4-minute TikTok video threatening to burn down every mosque in Newcastle using highly offensive and inflammatory language. The court condemned his actions as hugely offensive and dangerous, emphasising the potential of such statements to incite violence, especially during a period of widespread unrest. Number 5 on the list is Ryan Bailey. 41-year-old Bailey from Plymouth was sentenced to 30 months in prison after pleading guilty to violent disorder during riots in the city. Bailey was observed throwing a missile at anti-fascist counter-protestors and was heard chanting "Immigrants not welcome here." The court highlighted his active participation in the unrest, contributing to tensions between opposing groups. Number 6 on the list is Andrew Ball. 49-year-old Ball from Plymouth was sentenced to 32 months in prison after pleading guilty to violent disorder during protests in the city. The court heard that Ball had been aggressive towards officers, swearing at them, squaring up to them, and pouring a can of drink over them. He was pushed to the ground by police as he attempted to reach a counter-demonstration. Ball had a significant criminal history with 51 prior court appearances for 93 offences, including racially aggravated harassment and public order offences. At number 7 on the list is Lisa Bishop. 38-year-old Bishop from Lawrence Weston in Bristol was sentenced to 26 months in prison after pleading guilty to violent disorder. Bishop was involved in an anti-immigration protest in Bristol, where she was seen throwing a can and verbally abusing police officers and counter-protesters outside a hotel housing asylum seekers. The court described her actions as part of a terrifying mob that left police officers overwhelmed and residents fearing for their safety. At number 8 is Stuart Bolton. 38-year-old Bolton from New Holland, North Lincolnshire, drove more than 50 miles to hurl racist abuse at police during rioting in Rotherham. He pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was jailed for 2 years and 8 months at Sheffield Crown Court. Bolton was filmed angrily shouting at a line of police officers protecting the Holiday Inn Express, which was housing asylum seekers, on Sunday the 4th of August. At number 9 on the list is Mark Bowen. 40-year-old Bowen from Burton in Wiltshire was sentenced to 25 months in prison after pleading guilty to violent disorder during an anti-immigration protest in Bristol. Prior to the demonstration, Bowen had consumed up to 10 pints of cider, and during the protest he was captured on police body cam footage shouting abusive language at officers, including the remark, "I hope it's your effing kids next, mate." Bowen's actions were part of a larger group that engaged in aggressive behaviour towards police officers and counter-protesters. The group was seen throwing objects at officers and shouting slogans such as "We want our country back." The protest escalated tensions in the city, leading to significant unrest. At number 10 on the list is Aaron Bradshaw. 28-year-old Bradshaw from Hartlepool was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in prison after pleading guilty to violent disorder during riots in Hartlepool. He was filmed throwing bricks, stones and wood at police officers, demonstrating aggressive behaviour and at one point wielding a police-style baton to police officers. Bradshaw's actions were part of a larger group that engaged in mob violence, throwing missiles at riot officers on Murray Street. Prosecutors described him as a persistent participant in the disorder, contributing to the chaos and posing a significant threat to public safety. At number 11 is Mark Bridgeford. 50-year-old Bridgeford from Salford was sentenced to 20 months in prison after pleading guilty to violent disorder during riots in Manchester. He was captured on CCTV participating in a mob attack on a lone black man in Piccadilly Gardens, punching and kicking the victim and shouting at riot police, "Sort your own effing country out." At number 12 is Charlie Bullock. 21-year-old Bullock from Middlesbrough was sentenced to 18 months in prison for his involvement in violent disorder during riots in the town centre. He was identified as a key participant, pushing against the police line and throwing bricks at the officers. At number 13 is Tommy Callaghan. 32-year-old Callaghan from Wigan was one of a number of people who joined in with racist chants and threw objects at police officers during disorder in Southport. Footage showed him as part of a large and aggressive mob after a vigil had taken place for the 3 young girls, Bebe, Elsie and Alice, who were murdered on the 29th of July. The court heard that Callaghan raised his fist and joined in with racist chants before surging forward at a police line. He then picked up a part of a brick, threw it at police, and then picked up a second missile even before the first had landed. At number 14 is John Khan. 51-year-old Khan was seen on police video footage on his mobility bike on the north side of Royal Parade in Plymouth, firstly bending down and then picking up an item and finally throwing it at counter-protestors. He was also shown to pick up a further item, a firework, and hurled it just before it went off. He pleaded guilty to violent disorder at Plymouth Crown Court and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. At number 15 is Dominic Kapaldi. 34-year-old Kapaldi was seen on video footage throwing items at police officers during unrest in Bristol city centre on the 3rd of August. The judge stated during his sentencing that Kapaldi had attended an extremist anti-immigration protest that started at Castle Park and ended up in front of the Mercure Hotel because it housed asylum seekers. The court heard that Kapaldi accepted throwing a coin but claimed to have no memory of the other items that were launched towards police. He was sentenced to 2 years and 10 months in prison after pleading guilty to violent disorder. At number 16 is Philip Cawthorne. 38-year-old Cawthorne was seen to have hurled a beer can which hit a police officer during rioting in Sunderland. Cawthorne, a former service person and veteran of the Iraq War, was seen amongst the mob shouting and acting aggressively. Cawthorne pleaded guilty to violent disorder, but claimed to have little memory as to what happened on that day. He was sentenced to 26 months in prison. At number 17 is Oliver Chapman. 23-year-old Chapman was involved in disorder in Manchester. On the 3rd of August, during disorder in the city centre, Chapman executed a spinning kick against a shop window outside of Sainsbury's supermarket on Mosley Street. In a subsequent police interview, he admitted to this act, referring to it as a silly spinning kick. Chapman was charged with violent disorder and pleaded guilty, and on the 15th of August at Manchester Crown Court, he was sentenced to 20 months in prison for his role in the disorder. At number 18 is Nile Chik. 31-year-old Chik was involved in disturbances in Bolton town centre. Chik was captured on social media footage breaking through a police barricade and throwing an object at officers. Chik was arrested and gave a prepared statement when interviewed by police. He told officers that he had made a stupid mistake and acknowledged that he should not have got involved, but that the situation had escalated quickly. He later pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was jailed for 26 months. At number 19 is Lucy Connolly. 41-year-old Connolly, the wife of a Conservative councillor, published a tweet on the same day as the murders of the 3 young girls in Southport, calling for mass deportation and for hotels with immigrants in to be set on fire. In early August, Connolly was arrested and remanded into custody. She appeared at Northampton Crown Court on the 2nd of September via video link from HMP Peterborough and pleaded guilty to the offence of publishing material intending to stir up racial hatred, contrary to Section 19 of the Public Order Act 1986. Connolly was sentenced to 31 months in prison. At number 20 on the list is Donna Coniff. 40-year-old Coniff took part in disturbances in Hartlepool's Murray Street area. Coniff was captured on CCTV throwing a brick and a rock towards police officers. She was also seen handing a brick to a young boy and encouraging him to throw it at police, and kicked out at an officer's shield. Coniff later claimed she had come across the riot by chance and expressed remorse for her actions. Despite these claims, the judge deemed her to be a persistent participant, and on the 19th of August at Teesside Crown Court, she was sentenced to 2 years in prison for violent disorder. At number 21 on the list is Justin Crimp. 49-year-old Crimp was captured on CCTV in Plymouth at the forefront of the disorder. He was seen throwing rocks and smashing the door of a TK Maxx store on Royal Parade, causing over £5,000 in damages. He was arrested at his home on the 7th of August after being identified through footage gathered by Devon and Cornwall police. Crimp pleaded guilty to charges of violent disorder and criminal damage, and on the 9th of August at Plymouth Crown Court, he was sentenced to 32 months in prison. At number 22 is Paul Dixon. 35-year-old Dixon was involved in a protest in Nottingham on the 3rd of August. Dixon was recorded shouting racist insults including pedo and Allah Allah "Who the F is Allah?" before punching an unidentified Asian man. He was subsequently arrested and found in possession of cannabis. Dixon pleaded guilty at Nottingham Magistrates Court to charges of using threatening, abusive or insulting words or behaviour, as well as possession of cannabis. And on the 15th of August, he was sentenced to 4 months in prison. At number 23 is Liam Doeg. 33-year-old Doeg was involved in unrest in Sunderland, and on the 2nd of August, during widespread disorder in Sunderland city centre, Doeg was captured on CCTV throwing a parasol at police officers and looting a vape shop. He was subsequently arrested and was initially charged with violent disorder and burglary. Subsequently, the charges against Doeg were upgraded to one of riot, a more serious offence carrying a maximum sentence of 10 years. On the 24th of October, he pleaded guilty to the charge of riot, and on the 4th of November at Newcastle Crown Court, Doeg was sentenced to 3 years and 8 months imprisonment for his involvement in the disorder. At 24 is Sha Duran. 48-year-old Duran, whilst not involved in direct violence, was seen wearing a Sunderland football shirt and a blue denim jacket, shouting provocations at police and encouraging others to join the disorder in Sunderland. His actions were captured on body-worn police footage, where he was observed gesturing towards the police line and urging others to advance. Duran pleaded guilty to a public order offence of using threatening or abusive words or behaviour with intent to cause fear of or provoke unlawful violence. On the 9th of September at Newcastle Crown Court, he was sentenced to 12 weeks in prison. At number 25 is Derek Drummond. 58-year-old Drummond was involved in violent disturbances in Southport on the 30th of July. He was captured on CCTV shouting insults at police officers and punching a police officer in the face. This incident was part of a larger riot involving approximately 1,000 individuals, during which over 50 officers were injured, a mosque was besieged and a police van was set alight. Drummond pleaded guilty to violent disorder and assaulting an emergency worker, and on the 7th of August at Liverpool Crown Court, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. For his part, Drummond expressed remorse for his behaviour, acknowledging the high tensions during the protest and stating that he was absolutely ashamed of the way I acted. At 26 is Jack Fowler. 24-year-old Fowler travelled from his home in Newcastle to film events of disorder in Sunderland and live-streamed it. Fowler did not engage in any violence himself, but was seen actively encouraging others to take part in scenes of confrontation against the police and destruction of property arising out of an anti-immigration protest on the city on the 2nd of August. Fowler, who was wearing a mask and carrying a St George's Cross flag, was heard berating politicians for allowing mass immigration and telling police officers, "This is going to be constant, all summer, everywhere." He also beckoned others to confront the police line and join in the chant of "Whose street? Our streets." Fowler admitted a charge of violent disorder and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. At number 27 is Declan Gearan. 29-year-old Gearan was caught on CCTV trying to set alight a police van in Liverpool city centre during violent disturbances on Saturday the 3rd of August. He was arrested and charged with violent disorder and arson and was found with 3 lighters on him at the time of his arrest. He was sentenced at Liverpool Crown Court to 30 months in prison. At number 28 is Adnan Gor. 31-year-old Gor from Leeds was involved in clashes in Leeds city centre. Gor was captured on CCTV punching a man during a brawl between groups of Asian men and a smaller group of 4 white men, one of whom was draped in a Union flag and wearing a Union flag mask. The incident occurred amid heightened tensions and protests across the country. Gor pleaded guilty to a fray and was sentenced to 18 months in prison. Additionally, he received a 12-month sentence for breaching an unrelated suspended sentence, resulting in a total of 30 months in prison. At 29 is Brian Gilby. 29-year-old Gilby actively participated in the chaos that unfolded in Sunderland. He was seen engaging in destructive activities, including attacking a police building and looting a vape shop. His actions were part of a larger pattern of violence that led to substantial damage to local businesses. Following his arrest, Gilby was initially charged with violent disorder. However, upon further review, the Crown Prosecution Service upgraded his charge to the more serious offence of riot, reflecting the severity of his actions during the unrest. In November, Gilby pleaded guilty to the charge of riot at Newcastle Crown Court, and he was subsequently sentenced to 3 years and 4 months in prison. At number 30 is Reece Greenwood. 31-year-old Greenwood was also involved in the disorder in Sunderland and actively participated in the riots. Greenwood live-streamed himself on Facebook, encouraging violent behaviour and verbally abusing police officers. He was heard shouting racial and religious slurs, including "effing Muslim bastards," and chanting phrases associated with far-right groups. His livestream also captured scenes of individuals throwing rocks and preparing to haul beer kegs, during which Greenwood was heard laughing and encouraging the violence. Following his arrest, Greenwood pleaded guilty to violent disorder at Newcastle Crown Court, and he was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. At number 31 is Dean Gronwald. 32-year-old Gronwald became actively involved in the violent events in Sunderland's city centre. He was captured on footage throwing a missile towards a line of police officers in the Keele Square area. The unrest resulted in injuries to several officers, damage to police vehicles, and attacks on local businesses. Following his arrest, Gronwald pleaded guilty to 1 count of violent disorder, and on the 19th of August at Newcastle Crown Court, he was sentenced to 26 months in prison. His defence barrister noted that he had been carried away during the events and had since recognised the gravity of his actions. At number 32 is Kerry Grove. 34-year-old Grove was involved in a violent protest in Plymouth on the 5th of August when 2 groups of protesters clashed. A number of police officers were injured during the altercation in Royal Parade near Guildhall. The court heard that Gove handed herself into police and said that she gets gobby and violent when drunk, but was tipsy and not completely drunk on the 5th of August. Gove was captured in footage 6 times being actively involved in disorder. She ignored police instructions to go back and pushed, kicked and punched police shields. Gove also filmed police on her mobile phone and demanded their shoulder numbers. She told police she had been drinking in the city centre and was unsure what the protest was about, and she was stupid to get involved. She pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was sentenced to 18 months in prison. At number 33 is Glyn Guest. 60-year-old Guest was another person involved in the disorder outside of the Holiday Inn Express in Rotherham, which was housing asylum seekers at the time. Body-worn camera footage revealed Guest repeatedly approaching a line of outnumbered police officers who were protecting the hotel. After being pushed back multiple times, Guest grabbed the shield of an officer, pulling them to the ground, an act that was met with cheers from the surrounding crowd. Following his arrest, Guest pleaded guilty to violent disorder, and on the 14th of August at Sheffield Crown Court, he was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in prison. At number 34 is Daniel Han. 58-year-old Han, a former English Defence League member, was involved in violent events in Sunderland city centre. He was observed shouting Islamophobic abuse outside a mosque and encouraging others to participate in the disorder. Han pleaded guilty to causing religiously aggravated fear of violence and was sentenced to 8 months in prison. At number 35 is Gary Harkness. 51-year-old Harkness became involved in the violent events that unfolded in Plymouth city centre. Body-worn camera footage captured Harkness making lewd gestures, swearing and pushing a police riot shield. He was described as being prolific throughout the evening, frequently appearing front and centre as the police attempted to manage the crowds. Harkness admitted to being heavily intoxicated at the time, having consumed a considerable amount of alcohol prior to the incident. Following his arrest, Harkness pleaded guilty to violent disorder, and on the 13th of August at Plymouth Crown Court, he was sentenced to 12 months in prison. At number 36 is Roger Hayward. 41-year-old Hayward from Blackpool played a central role in disturbances in the town. He led a group through town, actively encouraging violence and directing the crowd to various locations, including the Cenotaph, Blackpool Tower, and the Comedy Carpet. Hayward's actions included confronting police lines, attempting to prevent store shutters from closing, and assaulting a security guard at JD Sports. During his arrest, he kicked 2 police officers. Following his arrest, Hayward pleaded guilty to violent disorder and 2 counts of assaulting an emergency worker. On the 16th of August at Preston Crown Court, he was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison. At number 37 is Cain Hicks. 22-year-old Hicks from Barnsley became involved in the violent events outside of the Holiday Inn Express in Rotherham, which was housing asylum seekers at the time. Hicks was captured on video hurling abuse at police officers, particularly targeting a female officer and attempting to push away riot shields used by the police to protect the hotel. Despite being identified from images released by the police, Hicks initially refused to cooperate during questioning, showing no remorse for his actions. Following his arrest, Hicks pleaded guilty to violent disorder, and on the 13th of August at Sheffield Crown Court, he was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in prison and had a 10-year criminal behaviour order imposed upon him. At number 38 is Philip Hoban. 48-year-old Hoban, a self-styled paedophile hunter and founder of the group Predator Exposure, participated in an anti-immigration demonstration in Leeds city centre. During the protest, Hoban was observed mocking Islamic practices by imitating Muslim prayer and chanting offensive slogans, including Allah, Allah, who the F is Allah. He later claimed he was referring to Alan instead of Allah, though following his arrest, Hoban pleaded guilty to racially aggravated harassment, alarm or distress, and on the 19th of August at Leeds Crown Court, he was sentenced to 8 months in prison. At number 39 is Joshua Hobman. 33-year-old Hobman was involved in the riots that took place in Hull city centre. The court heard that he played a prominent role in the violent scenes that involved dozens of people, including outside a hotel that was housing asylum seekers at the time. Hobman threw missiles in Ferrens Way, including a drinks can, and he punched out at police. He was described as being in the thick of it during disturbances, and he was also near shops that had been looted during the disorder. He later pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was jailed for 2 years. At number 40 is Leanne Hodgson. 43-year-old Hodgson was filmed pushing a large bin towards a line of police officers during disorder in Sunderland. The court heard that Hodgson was very drunk and angry at the time. She pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months at Sheffield Crown Court. At 41 is Carl Holliday. 30-year-old Holliday was involved in the violent unrest that broke out in Hartlepool on the 31st of July. During the riots, Holliday was caught on camera repeatedly throwing a large metal shelving unit at police officers over a 7-minute span. He was heavily intoxicated at the time, having consumed around 30 cans of lager. His actions contributed to the large-scale disorder that saw officers and emergency services targeted by rioters. Holliday later pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in prison. During sentencing, his defence counsel argued that his behaviour was not politically motivated, but rather the result of excessive alcohol consumption and poor decision-making. At number 42 is John Honey. 25-year-old Honey from Hull was prominently involved in the riots that erupted in the city. Wearing a distinctive St George's Cross t-shirt, Honey was captured on CCTV looting multiple stores, including Lush, O2 and Shoe Zone. He was seen carrying bags filled with cosmetics from Lush during the ransacking on the 3rd of August. Beyond the looting, Honey participated in an attack on a BMW carrying 3 Romanian men, attempting to drag them from the vehicle amidst a mob of over 100 individuals. He also targeted a garage, resulting in damage to 9 vehicles, and was observed pushing bins at police officers during the unrest. Honey pleaded guilty to violent disorder, 3 counts of burglary, and racially aggravated criminal damage. He was sentenced to 4 years and 8 months in prison. At number 43 is David Jordan. 59-year-old Jordan was sentenced to 28 months in prison for his involvement in a violent protest outside the Holiday Inn Express Hotel in Tamworth on the 4th of August. The hotel was housing migrants at the time. During the incident, Jordan was captured on video throwing a missile towards the hotel, shouting offensive remarks such as effing pedos and directing profanities at police officers. He also sent a Facebook message encouraging others to spread information about migrants being relocated to a different hotel. Upon arrest, Jordan admitted to being an angry old man shouting his mouth off and acknowledged that his actions were far from a peaceful protest. He pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was sentenced to 28 months in prison. At 44 is Ashkan Kareem. 33-year-old Kareem was involved in significant unrest in Darlington on the 5th of August between 2 large groups, leading to serious violence in the North Lodge Park area. Kareem was captured on CCTV throwing a missile towards a group of people. Following a social media appeal by Durham Constabulary, Kareem was arrested on the 12th of August. Kareem appeared in court on the 13th of August, where he pleaded guilty to a charge of violent disorder, and he was sentenced at Teesside Crown Court on the 16th of August to 1 year in prison. At number 45 is Tyler Kay. 26-year-old Kay was sentenced to 38 months in prison for publishing material intended to stir up racial hatred. On the 7th of August, Kay posted an offensive anti-immigration message on X, calling for hotels housing asylum seekers to be set on fire. He further engaged with others online, affirming that such actions were 100% the plan, and shared content inciting action against a specific immigration law firm in Northampton. His post also provided guidance on avoiding police detection during the protests. Upon his arrest, Kay admitted to making the posts, claiming that he wanted to demonstrate that an average person would not face consequences for such actions. The judge was convinced that Kay intended to stir up racial hatred, leading to his substantial prison sentence of 38 months. At 46 is Josh Kellett. 29-year-old Kellett was filmed during disorder in Sunderland, throwing a number of rocks and stones at police officers, whilst part of a large group of 700 people which the police were trying to control. He was wearing a balaclava at the time, but was identified by his distinctive tattoos. He pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months in prison. At 47 is Daniel Kingsley. 33-year-old Kingsley on the 10th of August published 2 racist posts supporting the ongoing riots and encouraging further unrest. One of these posts was specifically inciting riots at multiple properties in the Deeside area in North East Wales. Upon being alerted to these posts, North Wales Police identified Kingsley as the account holder and arrested him on the same day. He was subsequently charged under sections 19.1 and 27.3 of the Public Order Act 1986 for distributing written material intended to stir up racial hatred. During his appearance at Mould Crown Court on the 15th of August, Kingsley pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to 21 months in prison. At 48 is Ian Kirtley. 36-year-old Kirtley was involved in disorder in Sunderland and was draped in an England flag when he was part of a group that went to attack a mosque in St Mark's Road, but was thwarted by a line of police officers. A short while later, he intervened in the arrest of a man on Highlet Road, pulling him free so he could escape from a horse-mounted police officer. Later, Kirtley filmed people throwing stolen beer kegs at police and indicated a bin to protesters to be used as a weapon. After being arrested, Kirtley claimed he had simply gone to wave a flag and was pointing to the bin to tell people not to use it. He pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was sentenced to 21 months in prison. At 49 is John Kirtley. 26-year-old Kirtley was involved in rioting in Sunderland. On the 2nd of August, he was captured on video wearing an England flag, kicking at a line of police officers in riot gear and pushing a shopping trolley towards them. He was also seen holding a blue flare, shouting "England till I die," and throwing a beer keg at officers who were guarding a mosque. Kirtley initially pleaded guilty to violent disorder. However, prosecutors later upgraded the charge to a more serious offence of riot, and on the 2nd of December he appeared at Newcastle Crown Court and admitted to the charge of riot. He is currently on remand, awaiting sentence. At number 50 is Joseph Ley. 30-year-old Ley was involved in a violent incident during unrest in Manchester on the 3rd of August. He was among a group of individuals who attacked a lone black man in Piccadilly Gardens, kicking and punching him whilst shouting racial slurs. The assault was captured on video, showing Ley taking a leading role in the attack. Ley was charged with violent disorder and possession of an offensive weapon, and at Manchester Crown Court he pleaded guilty to both charges. He was subsequently sentenced to 3 years and 2 months in prison. At number 51 is Trevor Lloyd. 49-year-old Lloyd was involved in a violent attack on a hotel housing asylum seekers. On the 4th of August, Lloyd joined an angry mob that targeted the Holiday Inn Express in Rotherham. The rioters threw bricks and debris at the hotel, attempted to set it on fire, and breached the building through a smashed fire door. Lloyd filmed himself entering the hotel and participating in the disorder. During the court proceedings at Sheffield Crown Court, the judge described footage of the attack as frightening and alarming, emphasising the terror experienced by hotel staff and police officers present during the incident. Lloyd pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was subsequently sentenced to 3 years in prison. At number 52 is Stephen Maylan. 54-year-old Maylan was sentenced to 2 years and 2 months in prison for his involvement in a riot targeting buildings housing asylum seekers. On the 31st of July, after spending the afternoon at a bingo session and consuming alcohol, Maylan and his partner Ryan Shears encountered a disturbance on Murray Street in Hartlepool. They joined a crowd of approximately 200 people where Maylan was identified as one of the main instigators of the disorder. He taunted police officers, incited the crowd to violence, and attempted to breach police cordons. Maylan pleaded guilty to violent disorder at Teesside Crown Court, and as I mentioned, he was sentenced to 2 years and 2 months in prison. At 53 is Bradley Makin. 21-year-old Makin from Sunderland took part in violent disorder during riots in the city. On the 2nd of August, Makin actively participated in the unrest, capturing and sharing videos on his Instagram account. In these clips, he was heard encouraging others to commit acts of vandalism, shouting phrases like "Go on" and "Every effing window." He also commented, "Go on man, it's the Olympics," as a rioter hurled a beer keg at police officers. Makin was identified through his Instagram username, leading to his arrest at his residence, where authorities also discovered quantities of cocaine and heroin. At Newcastle Crown Court, Makin pleaded guilty to charges of violent disorder and possession of Class A drugs, and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. At 54 is Bradley McCarthy. 34-year-old McCarthy from Bristol participated in violent disorder during an anti-immigration march in Bristol on the 3rd of August. McCarthy was part of a group that clashed with counter-protestors and police in Castle Park. He was observed threatening individuals, using racially abusive language, and shouting aggressively at police officers, including confronting a police dog. Despite being arrested for breaching the peace earlier in the day, McCarthy returned to the scene and continued his disruptive behaviour. At Bristol Crown Court, McCarthy pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was sentenced to 20 months in prison. At 55 is Daniel Maguire. 45-year-old Maguire was involved in violent disorder during protests in Plymouth city centre on the 5th of August. Maguire was captured in multiple photos and videos wearing a distinctive pink shirt, engaging in aggressive behaviour towards police officers. He was seen pushing and spitting at officers equipped with riot shields and refused to disperse when he was instructed. At Plymouth Crown Court, Maguire pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was jailed for 2 years and 2 months. At 56 is Luke Moran. 38-year-old Moran from Birkdale in Merseyside became actively involved in the ensuing riots. CCTV footage captured Moran among a crowd on Zetland Street, where he was seen throwing missiles, bins, and other items at police officers and vehicles. He approached a stationary police van, attempted to pull off its wing mirror, and forcefully punched the driver's side window. Subsequently, he used a large piece of concrete to strike the window multiple times, leaving the officer inside fearing for his life. Moran was arrested on the 14th of August after being identified from footage. He initially denied involvement, claiming he was not near the scene. However, he later pleaded guilty to violent disorder, and on the 21st of August at Liverpool Crown Court, he was sentenced to 3 years in prison. At 57 is William Nelson Morgan. 69-year-old Morgan became involved in riots in Liverpool. On the evening of the 3rd of August, Morgan joined a group of approximately 100 individuals on County Road. The group engaged in setting fires to bins, damaging businesses and buildings, and hurling missiles at police officers. Morgan was observed by police holding a wooden kosh, an offensive weapon, and body-worn camera footage captured him resisting arrest, during which he exclaimed, "I'm effing 70, to which an officer responded, "Well, why are you at an effing riot?" Morgan pleaded guilty to charges of violent disorder and possession of an offensive weapon, and on the 8th of August at Liverpool Crown Court, he was sentenced to 32 months in prison. At 58 is Charlie Mott. 28-year-old Mott was captured on CCTV wearing a face covering and gesturing to a large group of rioters to enter a Sainsbury's store on Mosley Street in Manchester. He then followed the group into the store and stole numerous items. The incident was part of a large-scale disorder that included attacks on businesses and confrontations with police. Following his arrest, Mott pleaded guilty to charges of violent disorder, theft, and criminal damage, and he was subsequently sentenced to 18 months in prison. At 59 is David Notley. 67-year-old Notley participated in a violent demonstration in London's Whitehall area. Amid a crowd of approximately 700 individuals, Notley confronted police officers, adopting a combative stance and engaging in Islamophobic chanting, including phrases like "You're not English anymore" and "Who the F is Allah?" He also assisted in pushing another demonstrator into a police officer, escalating the confrontation. Notley was subsequently arrested and pleaded guilty to charges of violent disorder and causing religiously aggravated distress. On the 20th of August at Inner London Crown Court, he was sentenced to 20 months in prison. At number 60 is John O'Malley. 43-year-old O'Malley was part of a large crowd that gathered outside a mosque in Southport. He was observed at the forefront of the mob, engaging in violent behaviour and using racist language. The situation escalated into a confrontation with the police, described as a pitched battle with a large and utterly lawless mob. O'Malley was subsequently arrested and charged with violent disorder. He pleaded guilty to the charge, and he was sentenced to 32 months in prison at Liverpool Crown Court. At number 61 is Wayneo Rock. 35-year-old O'Rourke utilised his social media platform on X, where he had over 90,000 followers, to disseminate disinformation and inflammatory content. He claimed that the Southport incident was a Muslim-perpetrated terrorist attack and urged residents to get out on the street, a post that garnered nearly 1.7 million views. Additionally, he shared images of a mosque in Liverpool and a burning car in Sunderland, accompanied by the captions that appeared to encourage further unrest. Following his arrest, O'Rourke was charged with publishing written material intended to stir up racial hatred. He pleaded guilty to the charge, and in August he was sentenced to 3 years in prison at Lincoln Crown Court. At number 62 is Nathan Palmer. 29-year-old Palmer became actively involved in the violent events on the 4th of August. He was part of the large mob that targeted the Holiday Inn Hotel in Rotherham. During the unrest, Palmer seized a police riot shield after an officer fell near an embankment. and he exhibited provocative behaviour towards police officers who were attempting to protect the hotel and its occupants. Palmer was arrested and subsequently pleaded guilty to violent disorder, and at Sheffield Crown Court he was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in prison. At number 63 is Jordan Parler. 28-year-old Parler used Facebook to incite violence against a local hotel housing over 200 asylum seekers and refugees. In his posts, Parler urged his followers to smash the F out of the Britannia Hotel in Leeds. These inflammatory messages contributed to actual attacks on the hotel, where individuals threw stones, broke windows, and forced the establishment into lockdown for the safety of its residents. Although there was no evidence that Parler personally participated in the physical attacks, his online incitements played a significant role in escalating tensions and violence. Following his arrest, Parler pleaded guilty to publishing written material intended to stir up racial hatred, and on the 9th of August at Leeds Crown Court, he was sentenced to 20 months in prison. At number 64 is Billy Pemberton. 31-year-old Pemberton was yet another individual involved in the violent events targeting the Holiday Inn Express in Rotherham. Pemberton was part of a group that caused damage to the hotel's windows and threw large planks of wood at individuals trapped against the building. He was also observed holding a police baton, which he later took to local pubs and used it as a bragging tool among his friends. Initially, Pemberton claimed that he went straight home after the disorder, but CCTV evidence contradicted his account, placing him at 2 pubs post the incident. Following his arrest, Pemberton pleaded guilty to violent disorder and possessing an offensive weapon in a public place. On the 15th of August at Sheffield Crown Court, he was sentenced to 2 years and 4 months in prison. At number 65 is Jordan Plain. 30-year-old Plain was part of a group of individuals who gathered outside Leeds Art Gallery, where an anti-racist counter-protest was happening on the 3rd of August. Plain made monkey noises and said members of the other group looked like monkeys and shouted rubber lips at them. He and others imitated how Muslims worshipped, wrapping flags and t-shirts around their heads as mock hijabs. He was sentenced to 8 months in prison after pleading guilty to racially aggravated, causing alarm, harassment or distress. At 66 is David Probert. 50-year-old Probert pleaded guilty to violent disorder after he was accused of repeatedly charging at police during violent disorder in London. He lunged and acted aggressively towards police who were trying to defuse a protest in Whitehall on the 31st of July, and was among 121 people who were arrested during the violent scenes outside of Downing Street. He was sentenced to 14 months in prison. At 67 is Stuart Randall. 55-year-old Randall pleaded guilty to 2 counts of racially aggravated criminal damage, 2 counts of burglary, criminal damage to 2 shops, and violent disorder, and was handed a 3-year sentence. Randall used a sledgehammer to smash up 2 black cars in an open garage belonging to a foreign national, while the terrified owner cowered inside, fearing for his life. He also danced in front of a police line while waving a riot shield and smashed the front windows of 2 shops. At 68 is Jordan Rawlings. 25-year-old Rawlings was among more than 700 people who gathered for a protest opposite Downing Street on the 31st of July as part of the disorder which spread following the Southport stabbings. During his appearance at Teesside Crown Court, the court was shown a video of people, including Rawlings, making gestures to the police and shouting, "You're not English anymore," among other insults. Rawlings pleaded guilty to an offence of racially aggravated, causing harassment, alarm or distress, and was sentenced to 24 weeks in prison. At number 69 is Liam James Riley. 41-year-old Riley approached officers, waving his arms aggressively, and threw rocks and bricks at police during disorder in Liverpool city centre. He fell when officers ran towards the group he was with, and he was arrested at the scene. He pleaded guilty to violent disorder and admitted a charge of racially aggravated behaviour. He was jailed for 20 months. At 70 is Daniel Russell. 47-year-old Russell was seen kicking a black man who was part of an anti-racism protest after the man broke through police lines separating the two groups in Castle Park in Bristol. Russell was then captured on footage posted on social media, kicking out at counter-protestors who had stood in front of the entrance to the Mercure Hotel. He pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months in prison. At number 71 is Liam Ryan. 28-year-old Ryan, who had travelled from West Yorkshire to Manchester to join in with the disorder, accepted playing an active role in the disorder, which saw a black man attacked by a large group of far-right protesters. Ryan was wearing a bright yellow coat with his hood up to conceal his identity. He was seen to punch the man twice as others shouted, "Fill him in, stamp on his effing face." He pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was jailed for 2 years and 4 months. At 72 is Ryan Shears. 29-year-old Shears, who had been with his partner Stephen Malin, mentioned earlier, at bingo and had been drinking all day before he joined a crowd gathered on Murray Street in Hartlepool. Shears was seen goading a line of police officers who were pelted with bottles, bricks and cans of beer, resulting in 8 officers being injured. Shears, when ordered to move back, refused and instead moved forward, shouting, "Don't touch me, I pay your wages." He was then bitten by a police dog. He pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was sentenced to 2 years and 2 months in prison. At number 73 is Nigel Simpson. 57-year-old Simpson was involved in disorder in Bolton on the 4th of August. During that disorder, there were clashes between protesters and counter-protesters. Simpson was seen throwing missiles at police and was arrested. He pleaded guilty to violent disorder at Bolton Crown Court and was sentenced to 2 years and 4 months in prison. At number 74 is Luke Sissons. 34-year-old Sissons was involved in a range of violent incidents at a Holiday Inn Express in Rotherham, which was housing 200 asylum seekers. He was part of a mob rocking a police van, and footage was shown of him at the front of a group goading police officers with riot shields who were pinned against the hotel wall whilst he told one of the officers, "I hate immigrants." He pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. At number 75 is Paul Sissons. 37-year-old Sissons, the brother of Luke Sissons, was also jailed for violent disorder. He was another person part of the disorder at the hotel in Rotherham and was filmed throwing missiles at a group of police officers who had been cornered, as well as kicking at a police riot shield. Paul Sissons was also sentenced to 3 years in prison at Sheffield Crown Court. At number 76 is Lucas Ormond Skeeping. 29-year-old Skeeping was part of an anti-fascist protest, but was arrested following review of GoPro footage during unrest in Plymouth city centre. He was captured using a motorbike helmet to knock a man off his bike, and was also seen throwing objects, including a stone and a bottle. He pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was sentenced to 1 year and 6 months in prison. At number 77 is Andrew Smith. 41-year-old Smith was involved in a riot in Sunderland city centre. Dressed in black with his hood up, Smith was observed at the forefront of a crowd during the unrest. When police instructed the crowd to move back, Smith initially complied, but then retrieved a can of alcohol from his pocket and hurled it at the officers. In response, a police dog subdued him, and he resisted arrest during the process. Smith pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was sentenced to 26 months in prison. At number 78 is Charles Smith. 22-year-old Smith participated in a protest near Downing Street in London that escalated into violent disorder in July 2024. Smith was observed adopting a confrontational stance and chanting derogatory terms including scum directed at police officers. He also joined in Islamophobic chants, notably "Who the F is Allah" during the unrest. Smith pleaded guilty to affray and racially aggravated harassment, and in August 2024 he was sentenced to 23 weeks in prison and was fined £800. At number 79 is David Spring. 61-year-old Spring, who was also involved in a protest near Downing Street in London that escalated into a riot. Smith was part of a 700-strong group that ignored police cordons, assaulted officers, and caused significant disorder in the Whitehall area. He was observed acting aggressively towards police officers, and following his arrest, Spring pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was sentenced to 18 months imprisonment at Inner London Crown Court. Upon arrest, he told officers, "I didn't go up to London to riot. I went to complain about people put up in hotels." At number 80 is Dimmitri Stoker. 25-year-old Stoker was sentenced to 3 months in prison after falsely claiming during a TikTok livestream that he was running for his life from rioters. On the evening of the 7th of August, Stoker broadcast to his approximately 700 followers, alleging that he was being chased by extreme right-wing rioters in Derby's Normanton Road area. Upon investigation, police found no evidence of such an incident, and Stoker admitted his claims were a joke intended to gain more followers. Stoker was charged with sending a false communication with the intent to cause harm under Section 179 of the Online Safety Act 2023. During his court appearance, he pleaded guilty and was subsequently jailed for 3 months. At number 81 is Guy Sullivan. 43-year-old Sullivan was involved in significant public disorder in Plymouth city centre. During the unrest, Sullivan was captured on CCTV smashing the glass door of a Tesco store on Corbrough Street, entering the premises and stealing approximately £280 worth of alcohol. He pleaded guilty to burglary and was sentenced to 16 months in prison. Further investigations revealed that Sullivan had also participated in an assault on a police officer during the same period of unrest. He was seen approaching an officer from behind, seizing the officer's baton and fleeing. This act left the officer defenceless and led to him being attacked by other individuals present. Sullivan admitted a charge of violent disorder and was subsequently sentenced to an additional 26 months in prison. At number 82 is Julie Sweeney. 53-year-old Sweeney was sentenced to 15 months in prison for posting a Facebook comment in August 24 suggesting that mosques should be blown up. Her comment, "Blow the mosques up with the adults in it," was made in response to a photo showing people cleaning up after the Southport riots. Sweeney pleaded guilty to sending a threat of death or serious harm and was jailed for 15 months. At number 83 is Billy Thompson. 31-year-old Thompson from Cumbria was arrested for posting a racially aggravated and threatening comment on Facebook. His post was in response to a police announcement about a dispersal order in Carlisle related to anticipated unrest following disorder throughout the country. Thompson's comment included offensive language and emojis depicting a person of ethnic minority alongside a gun. Thompson was charged under Section 127 of the Communications Act 2003 and appeared before North Cumbria Magistrates Court, where he pleaded guilty. He was sentenced to 12 weeks in custody. At number 84 is Kieran Usher. 32-year-old Usher participated in a riot in Sunderland city centre. Captured on CCTV, Usher was seen wearing a face covering and a Union flag, encouraging others to engage in violence and throwing missiles at police officers. He played a leading role in escalating the disorder, which involved a group of at least 20 individuals attacking law enforcement. Usher pleaded guilty to the charge of riot at Newcastle Crown Court in September 24. Taking into account his early guilty plea and learning difficulties, the court sentenced him to 4 years and 4 months in prison. The judge stated that such coordinated violence justified the severe charge of riot, which carries a maximum sentence of 10 years. This case marked the first conviction for riot following the nationwide unrest during that summer. At number 85 is Ian Vettier. 36-year-old Vettier was sentenced to 18 months in prison for his involvement in violent disorder during a protest on the Esplanade in Weymouth. Vettier pleaded guilty to the charge at Bournemouth Crown Court. During the protest, he was observed shouting abuse and engaging in aggressive behaviour towards police officers. The court noted that Vettier played a prominent role in the unrest, contributing to the threatening atmosphere that endangered public safety. Despite his wife's attempts to dissuade him from participating, Vettier remained actively involved in the disorder. At number 86 is Stacey Vint. 34-year-old Vint was sentenced to 20 months in prison for her involvement in a riot in Middlesbrough town centre. During the unrest, Vint was captured on camera attempting to push a burning wheelie bin towards a police cordon. She fell to the ground during the incident and was subsequently arrested. Vint later pleaded guilty to violent disorder and was jailed. At number 87 is Amir Walid. 24-year-old Walid from Plymouth was sentenced to 20 months in prison for throwing cans at far-right rioters who had hurled alcohol at him during a protest. This incident occurred on the 5th of August, when Walid, who is a Muslim, was confronted by far-right extremists whilst attending an anti-racist rally. The rioters, who were chanting racist slurs, threw alcohol at him, which angered him due to his Islamic beliefs prohibiting alcohol consumption. In response, Walid threw cans back at them. The judge acknowledged that Walid had not been looking for trouble and that the rioters had been throwing missiles and making deeply offensive racist chants. However, the judge stated that Walid should have risen above the simple, obnoxious racism, and he was sentenced to 20 months in prison. At number 88 is Ian Ward. 53-year-old Ward was involved in a counter-demonstration in Brighton. During the event, he approached a line of police officers separating opposing groups and assaulted a far-right activist by punching him in the face. In the process, Ward also pushed a female police officer. His actions were captured on camera, leading to his identification and arrest. Ward pleaded guilty to charges of affray, assault by beating, and assault on an emergency worker. And at Hove Crown Court, he was sentenced to a total of 16 months in prison, with the sentences for each charges running concurrently. At numbers 89 and 90, we have Adam and Ellis Wharton. 28-year-old Adam Wharton and 22-year-old Ellis Wharton were involved in the looting of the Spello Hub, a community library and resource centre in Liverpool. During the unrest, the library was set on fire, and Adam Wharton, acting as a lookout, encouraged his younger brother Ellis Wharton to enter the premises and steal items. Ellis was apprehended by a police officer while attempting to remove a large computer monitor from the building. Both brothers pleaded guilty to burglary with intent to steal. Adam Wharton also pleaded guilty to assaulting an emergency worker and was sentenced to 20 months in prison, while Ellis Wharton received an 11-month sentence. At number 91, we have Ryan Wheatley. 40-year-old Wheatley participated in a protest in Southampton's Grosvenor Square. He was wearing a face covering and was draped in a St George's Cross flag and aggressively charged towards anti-racism protesters. As he attempted to breach a police line, he collided with a police sergeant, using his full weight to shove the officer. This act was perceived as an attempt to incite violence against counter-protestors. Following his arrest, Wheatley was charged with assault by beating of an emergency worker. He pleaded guilty to the charge at Southampton Magistrates Court and was subsequently sentenced to 12 months in prison. At number 92 is Connor Whiteley. 26-year-old Whiteley was involved in a riot in Hull. During the unrest, Whiteley was captured on CCTV attempting to conceal his identity with a black scarf. He confronted police officers who were protecting a hotel known to house asylum seekers. At one point, Whiteley kicked the shield of a female police officer, causing her to fall and sustain minor injuries to her elbow and forearm. Whiteley also joined a group that attacked a garage, setting vehicles on fire and threatening staff members who had to lock themselves inside for safety. He was seen leaning through the rear window of one of the damaged cars. In court, Whiteley pleaded guilty to violent disorder and assaulting an emergency worker and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. At number 93, we have Lewis Whitworth. 30-year-old Whitworth was involved in a riot outside a hotel housing asylum seekers. After leaving a pub, Whitworth joined the mob that was hurling missiles and abuse at the hotel in Manchester. He was seen kicking a bus and laughing as projectiles, including broken bricks, were thrown at police officers, although he was not observed throwing any objects himself. Whitworth was arrested and charged with violent disorder. He pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 20 months in prison. At number 94 is Ashley Wilkinson. 35-year-old Wilkinson actively participated in violent disorders in Hartlepool and Sunderland. On the 31st of July, during unrest in Hartlepool, Wilkinson, wearing a St George's flag with his face covered, was seen on CCTV throwing objects at police officers while armed with a baton. Just days later, on the 2nd of August, he joined riots in Sunderland, where he hurled bricks at officers guarding a mosque and threw a metal fence towards them in Keele Square. His actions contributed to significant property damage and posed serious risks to public safety. Wilkinson was arrested a week after the Sunderland incident at a protest in Newcastle. He was subsequently charged and pleaded guilty to riot for his actions in Sunderland and violent disorder for the Hartlepool incident. On the 20th of January 2025 at Newcastle Crown Court, Wilkinson was sentenced to 6 years in prison. At number 95 is David Wilkinson. 48-year-old Wilkinson played a prominent role in violent riots that erupted in Hull. On the 3rd of August, Wilkinson was part of a mob of over 100 men who targeted 3 Romanian men in a BMW. The group attempted to drag the occupants from the vehicle, with Wilkinson actively participating in the assault. Throughout the unrest, he was observed spitting, throwing missiles and pushing wheelie bins at police officers who were protecting a hotel known to house asylum seekers. At one point, Wilkinson was seen holding nunchucks, further escalating the threat level during the riot. Following his arrest, Wilkinson pleaded guilty to charges of violent disorder, attempted arson, and racially aggravated criminal damage. And in August of 24, at Hull Crown Court, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison. At number 96 is Michael Williams. 51-year-old Williams was involved in violent protests in Plymouth. During the unrest, Williams was observed fighting and kicking another individual. Upon his arrest, he was found in possession of a stone, which he claimed was a healing stone. However, that assertion was dismissed by the court as ludicrous. Additionally, video footage captured Williams chanting offensive remarks about Allah and repeatedly swearing at police officers. Williams pleaded guilty to a charge of violent disorder, and at Plymouth Crown Court, the judge sentenced him to 32 months in prison. At number 97 is Paul Williams. 45-year-old Williams became actively involved in a significant public disturbance in Sunderland. Initially, Williams had ventured into the area to collect takeaway food after spending time gardening. However, he soon became embroiled in the unrest, positioning himself at the forefront of the disorder. Eyewitness accounts and video evidence revealed that Williams exhibited aggressive behaviour towards the police officers, including throwing metal fencing and a beer can at them. He was also observed goading the officers, removing his shirt, and challenging them by shouting, "Put your shields down and let's go." Following his arrest, Williams expressed remorse by approaching the officers to apologise, even attempting to fist bump them and wishing them safety. Despite his apology, he was charged with violent disorder and subsequently pleaded guilty. In August of 24 at Newcastle Crown Court, he was sentenced to 2 years and 2 months in prison. At number 98 is Richard Williams. 34-year-old Williams was convicted for his role in inciting unrest during the nationwide riots. Williams actively participated in a local Facebook group dedicated to the protests, where he posted enthusiastic messages about engaging in riots and shared derogatory memes targeting migrants. His online activities were identified by police, leading to his arrest on the 7th of August. Williams was charged with sending menacing messages via a public communications network. He pleaded guilty to the charge, and on the 9th of August, he was sentenced to 12 weeks in prison by Mould Magistrates Court. At number 99 is Elliot Ragg. 23-year-old Ragg from Barnsley was involved in a riot outside a hotel housing asylum seekers in Rotherham. He was part of a mob of approximately 70 to 100 individuals who threw various objects at a small group of police officers stationed outside the hotel. Rag's actions were captured on video, showing him throwing items at the officers. Following his arrest, Rag was charged with violent disorder. He pleaded guilty to the charge and was sentenced to 2 years and 4 months in prison. And finally, at number 100 is Brian Spencer. 40-year-old Spencer was involved in violent disorder in Southport. He was seen on footage punching a police vehicle several times and picking up and throwing wheelie bins at officers. He was charged with violent disorder and pleaded guilty at Liverpool Crown Court, and he was sentenced to 2 years and 6 months. But the thing he will most be remembered for is this video, which I promised you at the start of the video and is your reward for getting to the end. Thanks for watching everyone, please drop a comment or give this video a like, and I will see you on the next one.